Marcus had never been the type to chase trouble, but trouble always seemed to find him, usually at the worst possible moment. As the early morning sun crept over the city skyline, he stood at the edge of a decision that would reshape everything he thought he knew about loyalty, ambition, and himself. Life had been predictable until now. Same routines, same expectations, same unspoken fears. But destiny doesn't knock politely. Sometimes it rips the door off its hinges. And on this day, Marcus felt something shift, quietly, dangerously, pulling him toward a path he wasn't sure he was ready to walk. Marcus Whitmore had built an empire on numbers, cold, unforgiving mathematics that never lied, never disappointed, and never judged. At 42, his hedge fund controlled assets worth $37 billion. His penthouse overlooked Central Park from the 73rd floor, and his name appeared on the Forbes list every year without fail. Numbers made sense. People didn't. The rain hammered against the windows of Lucia's Diner on the corner of Amsterdam and 74th Street, a stubborn holdout in a neighborhood that had been swallowed by luxury condos and artisanal coffee shops charging $8 for foam in a cup. Marcus had walked past this place 1,000 times without seeing it, the way wealthy people navigate cities, their eyes trained to recognize only what matters, filtering out everything else, like visual spam. But tonight, his driver had called in sick, his usual restaurants were fully booked, and his phone had died somewhere between his office and this forgotten corner of the Upper West Side. The universe, it seemed, had conspired to humble him, though he didn't recognize the signs. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, shaking rain from his $3,000 Brioni suit. The diner smelled of coffee, bacon grease, and something sweet, perhaps pie or pancakes. A handful of customers occupied the red vinyl booths, a couple of college students hunched over laptops, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a woman with tired eyes feeding a toddler. Nobody looked up. Nobody recognized him. It was disorienting. "Sit anywhere you'd like, honey," a voice called from behind the counter. Marcus turned toward the voice and saw her for the first time. She was maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that held something he couldn't quite name. Not defeat, exactly, but a kind of worn resilience, like sea glass smoothed by years of waves. Her name tag read Claire in faded letters, and her uniform had been washed so many times the blue had faded to something closer to gray. She was nobody. Another face in the crowd of nobodies that kept the city running while people like him built empires on their backs. He slid into a booth by the window, annoyed by the sticky table, the cracked vinyl, the general shabbiness of everything. His world was Herman Miller chairs and Italian marble, not this museum of mediocrity. Claire approached with a pot of coffee, her smile professional but distant. "Coffee? Is it fresh?" he asked, already knowing the answer would disappoint him. "Made it 20 minutes ago. Best in the neighborhood." She poured without waiting for his response, and he noticed her hands, work-roughened, a small burn scar on her left thumb, nails cut short and practical. "I'll have the salmon," he said, not bothering to look at the laminated menu tucked between the napkin dispenser and the hot sauce. "We don't have salmon." Her tone was patient, like she was talking to a child. "This is a diner. We have meatloaf, burgers, breakfast all day, and Maria makes a really good chicken pot pie." He looked up at her then, really looked, trying to determine if she was being insolent. But her expression was neutral, maybe even kind. "Fine. Burger, medium rare, and your coffee is burnt." Something flickered across her face, not anger, but a kind of wearied amusement. "I'll let Maria know about the burger, and I'll make a fresh pot. Be right back." As she walked away, Marcus noticed the slight limp in her left leg, The way she moved with careful efficiency, wasting no steps. She delivered food to the elderly man, refilled water glasses, cleared a table, all with the same economical grace. His phone was dead, so he couldn't check his emails or review market reports. He was trapped in the present moment, with nothing but his thoughts and the rain drumming against the window. It made him anxious. When was the last time he'd sat still like this, with nothing to do? Years, probably. Claire returned with fresh coffee, and he had to admit, it was better. "Burger will be up in 10 minutes.
"You limp," he said, then immediately regretted the bluntness. He wasn't good at small talk, and something about the forced idleness made him awkward. She didn't seem offended. "Car accident 3 years ago. Doctor said I'd probably never walk without a cane, but here I am." She said it matter-of-factly, like she was describing the weather. "Did you sue?" "The driver didn't have insurance, and neither did I. Sometimes life just costs money you don't have." She shrugged. "You want ketchup with that burger?" Before he could answer, a man in a rumpled suit burst through the door, shaking off rain. "Claire, thank God, I need your advice." Claire's expression softened. "Hey, Tommy. Sit down, I'll bring you coffee." Marcus watched as the man, Tommy, collapsed into the booth across from his, looking defeated. Claire brought him coffee and sat down across from him, her break apparently self-declared. "I don't know what to do," Tommy said, his voice carrying in the small space. "The business is failing. I've got 3 employees depending on me. My wife is pregnant with our second kid, and the bank is threatening to foreclose on the building. I've been awake for 2 nights straight trying to figure out how to save it." Marcus felt a familiar contempt rising. Another small business owner who didn't understand basic economics, probably hemorrhaging money through inefficiency and sentimentality. But Claire leaned forward, her attention completely focused on Tommy. "Okay, talk me through the numbers. Revenue, expenses, debt service." For the next 15 minutes, Marcus found himself unwillingly listening as Claire dissected Tommy's failing printing business with the precision of a surgeon. She asked about his customer acquisition costs, his pricing strategy, his equipment depreciation schedule. She identified 3 major inefficiencies in his operation, suggested 2 potential pivots to digital services, and sketched out a bare-bones restructuring plan on a napkin. It was impressive, surprisingly sophisticated. "You need to cut your overhead by 40%. That means tough decisions. Let 2 people go, keep your best employee. Move to a smaller space. Talk to your landlord about a temporary rent reduction. Most would rather have you at 70% rent than go through the hassle of finding a new tenant. And you need to raise your prices by at least 20%. You're undervaluing your work." Tommy looked at the napkin like it was a life raft. "How do you know all this?" Claire smiled, and it was the first time Marcus had seen her expression truly warm. "I read a lot, and I used to have dreams too." After Tommy left, visibly lighter, clutching his napkin like scripture, Claire brought Marcus his burger. It looked perfect, exactly medium rare. He couldn't help himself. "Where did you learn that?" "Learn what?" She refilled his coffee. "Financial analysis, restructuring strategy. You talked about cap tables and burn rates like you have an MBA." She laughed, and it was a sound both bitter and amused. "No MBA, but I've got $140,000 in student loans from 2 years of business school I couldn't finish, so I guess I paid for part of the education." You felt something unfamiliar stir in your chest. Curiosity, maybe. "Why didn't you finish?" Claire glanced around the diner, checking her other customers with practiced efficiency, before meeting his eyes again. "My mom got sick. Pancreatic cancer. She didn't have insurance, and I was all she had. So I left school, came home, took care of her, worked 3 jobs to keep her comfortable and pay for her treatments." She said it without self-pity, just stating facts. She died anyway, 14 months later. By then I was $140,000 in debt, no degree, and nobody wants to hire a dropout to manage their investments. "So you became a waitress." "I became a lot of things. Waitress, bookkeeper for 3 small businesses, financial advisor to half the neighborhood, even though I can't use that title legally. She smiled. Turns out you don't need a fancy degree to understand money. You just need to understand people and what they're afraid of. Marcus felt something sharp and uncomfortable, a challenge to his entire worldview. That's naive. Finance is complex. Derivatives, algorithmic trading, risk-adjusted return models are tools, she interrupted gently, used by people. And people aren't complex. We're simple. We're all just afraid of the same things. Not having enough, losing what we have, not mattering. She tilted her head, studying him. What are you afraid of? The question landed like a punch. Nobody asked him things like that. Nobody dared. I'm not afraid of anything, he said, his voice harder than he intended. Everyone's afraid of something. Her tone was conversational, not confrontational. Usually the thing we're most afraid of is hidden under all the things we think we're afraid of. Marcus felt defensive, caught off guard. You know what? This is ridiculous. He reached for his wallet, pulling out a Platinum American Express card. How about this? Since you're such a financial genius, why don't you give me some advice? What should a billionaire invest in? He said it mockingly, a joke designed to put her back in her place, the waitress presuming to lecture him about fear and complexity. Claire looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted. Not anger, something sadder and wiser. You want my financial advice? She asked quietly. Sure. Enlighten me. He leaned back, arms crossed, waiting for her to embarrass herself. She set down the coffee pot and met his eyes directly.
Invest in being a person someone would miss if you died tomorrow. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The smug retort he'd prepared dissolved on his tongue. Because here's what I know about money, Claire continued, her voice soft but steady. I've watched my mom die in a hospital room, holding her hand while the morphine took her somewhere I couldn't follow. And you know what she said at the end? Not, I wish I'd saved more, or I wish I'd been more successful. She said, I'm so grateful you're here. I'm not alone. She picked up his empty plate, her movements calm and practiced. I've seen Tommy out there, terrified he'll lose his business. But you know what he's really afraid of? Letting down the people who depend on him, disappointing his wife, not being able to provide for his kids. The business is just numbers on paper. What matters are the people. Marcus felt something cracking inside him, like ice breaking. I've got $140,000 in debt I'll probably be paying off until I'm 60, Claire said. I work 50-hour weeks, on my feet, with a leg that aches every single day. I live in a studio apartment with my best friend's daughter because her mom died and I'm the only family she has left. I have $842 in my savings account. She paused, and her eyes were steady and clear. And I am rich in ways you can't imagine, because I know that Jenny, that's the little girl, will remember me her whole life. I know that Tommy's business might survive because of a conversation we had over coffee. I know that Mr. Henderson over there comes in every single day because his wife died 2 years ago and he's lonely. And I remember he likes his eggs scrambled soft with hot sauce. I matter to people. I'm not invisible. She leaned in slightly, her voice even quieter now. So here's my financial advice since you asked. You can have all the billions in the world, but if nobody would cry at your funeral, if nobody would miss your specific, irreplaceable presence on this earth, then you're the poorest person I know. Marcus couldn't breathe. The diner had gone fuzzy at the edges, and all he could see was this woman in her faded uniform, her tired eyes, her rough hands, and the truth blazing from her like a flame. The richest investment you can make, Claire said, is in becoming someone worth remembering. Not for what you owned, but for how you made people feel. For the space you filled in their lives that nobody else could fill. She straightened up, professional mask sliding back into place. Your burger was $14, the coffee's on the house. Then she walked away, back to her other customers, leaving Marcus alone with the wreckage of his certainty. Marcus didn't move for a long time. Rain continued its assault on the windows, and the diner's warmth felt suddenly stifling. He stared at his hands, soft, manicured, adorned with a Patek Philippe watch worth more than most people made in a year, and tried to remember the last time someone had touched them with affection. Years, maybe more. His ex-wife, Vanessa, her name was Vanessa, had left him 5 years ago. "You're not a husband," she'd said during the final argument. "You're a portfolio, and I'm tired of being another asset you manage." She'd remarried within 18 months to a high school teacher who made $60,000 a year. She looked happy in the photos he'd accidentally seen on social media. He'd told himself she was an idiot, that she'd traded security for sentimentality, that she'd regret it. But sitting in this worn booth, with Claire's words still echoing, he wondered if maybe Vanessa had seen something he'd been blind to, if she'd recognized poverty when she saw it, even disguised as wealth. When was the last time someone had asked him how he was doing and actually wanted to know the answer? When was the last time he'd cared about someone else's answer? Marcus pulled out his wallet and left $200 bills on the table, far more than the burger cost. He stood, legs uncertain beneath him, and walked toward the door. "Hey," Claire called after him. "You forgot your change." "Keep it," he said without turning around. "I don't want your guilt money." That stopped him. He turned to face her, and she was standing behind the counter, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "It's not," he started, then stopped, because it was, wasn't it? "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing. I don't want anything from you." She softened slightly. "Look, I wasn't trying to hurt you. You asked for advice, I gave it. But I'm not interested in being your charity case or your guilt absolution. If you want to tip me like a normal person. 20% is fine." He found himself walking back to the booth, leaving $28 instead, the proper amount. Claire nodded approval. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why are you here? Why aren't you somewhere else?" Claire smiled, and it wasn't entirely kind. "Because knowledge isn't the same as opportunity. I know how to make millions. I could probably make you richer than you already are, but I don't have capital, I don't have connections, and I don't have a degree that makes people take me seriously. In your world, I'm nobody, a waitress with student debt and opinions. That's not fair," she laughed. "No, it's not, but it's true. The game is rigged, and we both know it. People like you keep winning because the system is designed for people like you to win. And people like me keep serving your burgers and hoping we can scrape together enough to maybe, someday, have a shot." The bitterness in her voice was quiet, but unmistakable. "What if it didn't have to be that way?" Marcus heard himself say, surprising himself. "What? What if someone gave you capital, connections, a shot?" Claire studied him carefully, and her expression was guarded. "Why would you do that?" "Maybe because you're right. Maybe because I can't remember the last time someone told me the truth instead of what I wanted to hear. Maybe because I'm tired of being surrounded by yes men and sycophants. Or maybe because I'm scared shitless that you're right about everything, and I've wasted 42 years of my life accumulating things nobody will miss." The honesty surprised both of them. Claire was quiet for a moment, then gestured to the booth. "Sit down. Let me finish my shift. We can talk after." 2 hours later, the diner was empty except for Marcus, Claire, and Maria in the kitchen, cleaning up for the night. Claire had changed out of her uniform into jeans and an old Columbia sweatshirt, a ghost of the life she'd left behind. She slid into the booth across from him with 2 cups of coffee and a slice of apple pie she'd cut in half. Maria's recipe, she said, pushing a plate toward him. "You didn't have dessert." He tried the pie. It was exceptional. Cinnamon and butter and something undefinably comforting. "Okay," Claire said. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus had spent the 2 hours thinking about this, running scenarios, calculating risks. "I want to hire you." "As what? Your waitress?" She smirked. "As a consultant. Maybe more. I want you to look at my portfolio, not the hedge fund, my personal investments, and tell me what you see. Give me your honest assessment." "Why?" "Because everyone I currently employ tells me I'm a genius. And maybe I am when it comes to numbers. But tonight, you showed me that I might be a genius who's completely missing the point." Claire took a sip of coffee, considering. "What do you actually want from me? Really?" It was a good question. Marcus thought about it carefully before answering. "I want you to teach me how to be rich in the ways that matter," he said finally. "I want to understand what you understand. And in exchange, I'll pay you $200,000 a year, cover your student loans, and if your insights are as valuable as I think they'll be, I'll fund whatever business venture you want to pursue." Claire set down her coffee cup slowly. "That's insane." "Is it? I pay my junior analysts more than that, and they're nowhere near as insightful as you." "You don't know that. You've known me for 3 hours. Tommy trusted you with his entire business future after one conversation. The way you read his situation, identified the problems, proposed solutions, that wasn't luck. That was expertise born from lived experience." Marcus leaned forward. "The people I work with understand finance, but they don't understand what it's like to worry about rent, or choose between medication and groceries, or lie awake at night terrified of losing everything. You do, and that perspective is worth more than any MBA." Claire was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns in the condensation on her water glass. "What if I fail?" she asked finally, and her voice was smaller than before. "Then you fail with $200,000 in your pocket and no student debt. That's a better safety net than you have now." "What if I succeed?" "Then we both win. I become a better person, you build the life you deserve, and maybe we prove that the game doesn't have to be as rigged as everyone thinks." Claire looked up at him, and he saw the war in her eyes, hope battling cynicism, dreams fighting against the weight of experience and disappointment. "I'd have to give notice here. 2 weeks. Maria depends on me." "Of course." "And I'd need to make sure Jenny is taken care of. She's 10. I can't leave her alone while I work crazy hours. I'll hire a nanny, full-time, whatever you need. And I want it in writing, contract, all of it. I'm not taking your word. I wouldn't expect you to." Claire extended her hand across the table. "Okay, you've got yourself a consultant, Mr. She paused. "I don't actually know your name." "Marcus." "Marcus Whitmore." Her eyes widened. "Holy shit! You're the Whitmore? The hedge fund Whitmore?" "Yes." "And you came into a diner in the rain and asked a waitress for financial advice? I'm starting to think it was the smartest thing I've done in years." They shook hands, and Marcus felt the calluses on her palm, the strength in her grip, the reality of a life lived so differently from his own.
The contract was signed within a week. Marcus's lawyers tried to argue against it. $200,000 for a consultant with no credentials, they protested. But he overruled them. He paid off Claire's student loans in a single transaction that took 5 minutes and fundamentally changed the trajectory of her life. She cried when she saw the zero balance. Actually cried, sitting in his office with tears streaming down her face. And Marcus realized he'd never seen someone react to his money with pure, overwhelming relief. Just relief, not greed, not calculation, just the lifting of a crushing weight. "I thought I'd die with this debt," she whispered. "I thought it would follow me forever." "It won't," he said simply. "You're free."
She looked at him with something like wonder, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest, a warmth he couldn't quite name. Claire started work on a Monday. Marcus cleared out one of the analyst's offices and set her up with everything she needed: triple monitors, Bloomberg terminal access, direct lines to his trading desk. The other employees looked at her with barely concealed confusion and resentment. Who was this woman with no pedigree, taking up space in their elite domain? "Ignore them," Marcus told her. "Show them what you can do." And she did. Claire spent the first week doing nothing but reading. She devoured Marcus's entire personal portfolio: real estate holdings, private equity investments, venture capital positions, his art collection, his charitable foundation. She read shareholder reports, analyst notes, market forecasts. She interviewed his property managers, his accountants, his investment advisors. Then she sat down in his office and handed him a 30-page report. "You're hemorrhaging money on ego," she said bluntly. "Excuse me?" "Your art collection. You've spent $127 million on pieces that are appreciating at roughly 2% annually. You could put that money in index funds and make triple the return. But you don't actually like most of these pieces, do you? You bought them because they signal status, because having a Rothko and 2 Warhols means you've made it." She flipped to another page. "Your real estate. You own properties in 8 cities. You stay in each one maybe 2 weeks a year total. The maintenance, property taxes, and management fees cost you $4.3 million annually. You're paying millions to own empty spaces." Another page. "Your charitable giving gives to 17 different causes, but the donations are scattered: 50,000 here, 100,000 there. You're not making a meaningful impact anywhere. You're just checking boxes. Rich guy does charity. But you don't actually care about any of these causes. When was the last time you visited a recipient organization?" Marcus felt defensive anger rising. "These are all sound investments." "They're not investments. They're decorations. You're spending massive amounts of money to decorate a life you don't actually live." Claire's voice was firm but not unkind. "You asked me what I see. I see someone who's built an empire but doesn't know what to do with it. Someone who's winning a game but can't remember why he wanted to play in the first place." The words stung because they were true. "So what would you do?" he asked, voice tight. Claire pulled out another document. "Sell the art except for pieces you actually love. That's the Kandinsky in your apartment. I saw you look at it differently than the others, and maybe 3 or 4 more. Liquidate the rest. That's $90 million in capital. Sell 6 of the 8 properties. Keep New York and maybe the place in Montana you mentioned once, the cabin where you said your dad taught you to fish. Everywhere else is just wait. That's another $60 million. Consolidate your charitable giving. Pick one cause you actually care about, not one that looks good, but one that breaks your heart, and make a real difference. $10 million focused on one thing will change more lives than $2 million scattered across 17 things." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "That gives you $140 million in liquid capital and eliminates $5 million in annual carrying costs. Now you're not just rich, you're free. Free to figure out what you actually want your wealth to do." Marcus stared at the report, at her precise calculations and ruthless honesty. Nobody had ever talked to him like this. Nobody had ever suggested he might be wrong about everything. "And what should I want?" he asked quietly. "That's not my job to tell you. That's the work you have to do yourself." Claire softened. "But I can tell you what I've learned if you want to hear it." "Please." "Money is a tool. That's all it is. It's not good or evil. It's not meaningful or meaningless. It's a tool, like a hammer or a computer. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what am I building with this tool?" She gestured around his office, the mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "Right now, you're building monuments to yourself. Bigger house, better art, more impressive portfolio. And those things are fine, but they're hollow. They don't love you back. They don't remember you when you're gone." "So what should I build?" Claire smiled.
That's what we're going to figure out together.
Over the following months, Marcus's life changed in ways he couldn't have predicted. Claire made him visit every single one of his charitable donation recipients. They went to homeless shelters, school programs, medical research facilities, environmental organizations. She made him sit in waiting rooms and talk to people, made him listen to their stories. At a shelter in the Bronx, he met a woman named Patricia, who'd lost her apartment when the rent doubled overnight. She'd worked as a nurse for 23 years before a back injury forced her into disability. Now she slept on a cot and kept her possessions in a garbage bag. "The system doesn't give you a chance to catch up," Patricia told him. "One setback and you're falling, and there's nothing to grab onto on the way down." Marcus wrote a check for $50,000 to the shelter that night. Claire stopped him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because they need it." "That's not a strategy. That's a Band-Aid. If you want to make a difference, you need to understand the system that created the need. Then you fix the system, not just treat the symptoms." So they dug deeper. They researched housing policy, interviewed economists and social workers, studied successful programs in other cities. Marcus learned about housing first initiatives, rapid rehousing programs, the intersection of mental health services and homelessness. It was hard work, complicated, nothing like the clean mathematics of hedge fund management. But it mattered in a way nothing else had. He sold his art collection, kept the Kandinsky and 3 others that actually moved him. The rest went to auction, raising $94 million. The act of letting go was surprisingly liberating. He sold 6 properties, keeping only his New York apartment and the Montana cabin. The cabin had been his father's, bought in 1987, a modest place by the lake where they'd spent summers before his father died. Marcus hadn't visited in 15 years. When he finally went back, with Claire and Jenny joining him, he found himself crying on the dock at sunset, remembering what it felt like to be someone's son, to be loved for nothing more than existing. "Your dad would be proud of you," Claire said quietly, sitting beside him while Jenny skipped stones in the water. "I'm not sure that's true. I spent 20 years chasing money he never cared about." "You're spending now learning what matters. That's what he'd care about." Jenny ran over, breathless and grinning. "Claire, Marcus, I got one to skip 7 times. Did you see?" And Marcus realized with sudden clarity that this child, who wasn't his daughter, who had no biological connection to him, was teaching him something essential about love. Jenny loved Claire unconditionally, and Claire had rearranged her entire life to care for a girl who wasn't hers by blood, but was hers by choice. That's what family actually meant, not genetics. Choice. "I saw, Jenny," he told her. "That was amazing. Think you can get to 8?" As Jenny raced back to try again, Claire said, "You're different than you were 6 months ago. Is that good?" "It's real. That's better than good." The transformation wasn't easy. Marcus's old colleagues thought he'd lost his mind. His ex-wife heard rumors and called him, concerned he was having some kind of breakdown. "You're giving money away to homeless shelters?" Vanessa said over coffee, their first meeting in 4 years. "You sold your art collection? Marcus, are you okay?" "I'm better than I've been in years," he said honestly. "I think I'm finally figuring out what matters." She studied him carefully. "You look different, lighter." "I feel lighter." They talked for 2 hours, really talked, in a way they never had during their marriage. He apologized for making her feel like an asset instead of a partner. She apologized for leaving without fighting harder. "I'm happy now," she told him. "Daniel, my husband, he's a good man. He sees me." "I'm glad," Marcus said, and meant it. "You deserved better than I could give you then." "Maybe you can give it now, to someone else," she smiled. "That consultant you hired, Claire, the way you talk about her, your whole face changes." "It's not like that." "Isn't it?" The question haunted him, because somewhere along the way, his professional respect for Claire had transformed into something deeper.
He looked forward to their strategy sessions. He noticed when she smiled. He'd started keeping a drawer of her favorite tea in his office, and he'd learned that she liked her eggs scrambled soft, just like Mr. Henderson. But she was his employee. The power dynamic was impossible. He wouldn't complicate their working relationship with his feelings. Then one night, working late on a proposal for a comprehensive housing initiative they wanted to fund, Claire looked up from her laptop and said, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you have anyone in your life, someone who's yours, a person you come home to?" "No," I admitted. "Haven't for years. Work was easier than people." "Lonelier, though." "Yes, much lonelier." He paused. "What about you?" "I dated someone a few years ago. He couldn't understand why I'd take in Jenny. Said I was signing up for responsibility that wasn't mine. Like love is only valid if it's convenient." She shook her head. "I'd rather be alone than with someone who thinks caring is a burden." For what it's worth, taking in Jenny is one of the most remarkable things I have ever witnessed anyone do. Claire's eyes met his, and something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. "I think we've become friends," she said softly. "Is that weird, given everything? I think it's the best thing that's happened to me in a decade." She smiled, and it was the smile he'd been collecting in his memory like precious things. "Good, because I'd miss you if you weren't in my life." "I'd miss you too." It wasn't a declaration, but it was truth. And maybe that was enough for now.
A year after that night in the diner, Marcus stood in front of the newly opened Whitmore Harper Housing Initiative headquarters. The Harper was for Claire's mother, whose death had derailed Claire's dreams, but whose memory now fueled something larger. The initiative had purchased a failing hotel and converted it into supportive housing, 142 units with on-site mental health services, job training, childcare. They'd hired Patricia from the shelter as their community outreach coordinator. Tommy's printing business handled all the materials, thriving now with steady contracts. The ribbon cutting drew local press, community members, and the first residents, families who'd been living in shelters or on the streets, now moving into real apartments with real leases. Marcus watched a mother carry her daughter across the threshold, both of them crying with relief and joy, and he felt something he'd never felt with any of his previous achievements: purpose. Claire stood beside him, and he reached for her hand without thinking. She laced her fingers through his and squeezed. "Your first words left me," Marcus said quietly, echoing the title that had brought him to this moment. "They destroyed my certainty and rebuilt me into someone better, someone who might actually matter." "You always mattered," Claire said. "You just didn't know how to measure it yet." "And now?" She turned to face him fully, her eyes bright. "Now you're investing in the right things. People, community, legacy that lives beyond bank accounts." "We," Marcus corrected, "we're investing. None of this happens without you." "Partners, then." "Partners." He paused, gathering courage. "In all things? Not just professionally?" Claire's smile was answer enough, but she gave him words anyway. "I thought you'd never ask." They kissed there, in front of the building they'd created together, with cameras flashing and Jenny cheering and strangers starting their new lives inside. 5 years later, Marcus Whitmore's name appeared in the news not for his net worth, but for the Whitmore Harper Housing Initiative expanding to 12 cities. Claire Harper served as CEO, her face on the cover of Time magazine under the headline, "The Waitress Who Changed How America Houses Its Homeless." Marcus had downsized his hedge fund, selling his stake to focus full-time on philanthropic work. His wealth had decreased from $37 billion to $12 billion, shocking his old colleagues who couldn't understand why anyone would deliberately make less money. But he'd gained something impossible to quantify. He had Jenny, who called him Uncle Marcus and asked him to teach him about investing so she could change the world like you and Mom. Claire had adopted Jenny officially
And Marcus had been there, watching his partner become a mother in the way she'd always been one in spirit. He had Claire, who'd become his wife in a small ceremony at the Montana cabin, with Jenny as their flower girl and Tommy as their best man, and Patricia reading a poem. He had Patricia and Tommy and the 1,247 families who'd found homes through their initiative, each one a thread in a tapestry of connection and meaning. He had mornings waking up next to someone who knew him completely and loved him anyway. He had evenings playing board games with Jenny, teaching her that winning wasn't everything. He had weekends at the cabin, fishing in his father's favorite spot, feeling connected to a lineage of love rather than just wealth. And when Mr. Henderson from the diner died at 87, Marcus attended his funeral. The church was packed, people whose lives Henderson had touched, whose names he'd remembered, whose stories he'd cared about. Marcus sat in the back and cried, understanding finally what true wealth looked like. It looked like this: a church full of people mourning someone they'd miss, a life that had left marks on hundreds of hearts, a legacy measured not in dollars, but in the space someone had occupied in the world, irreplaceable, specific, deeply loved. That night, Marcus and Claire sat on their apartment balcony, looking out at the city that had witnessed his transformation. "Do you remember what you asked me that first night? What I was afraid of?" "You said you weren't afraid of anything." "I was lying. I was afraid of exactly what you warned me about, that I'd die and nobody would miss me, that my billions would mean nothing because I'd never mattered to anyone. And now?"
He pulled her closer, feeling the reality of her warmth, her breath, her solid presence. "Now I'm rich in all the ways that count. I have you, I have Jenny, I have people who'd cry at my funeral not because I wrote them into my will, but because I showed up for them, because I became someone worth remembering." Claire kissed his temple. "You know what's funny? You paid off my student loans thinking you were giving me freedom, but what you really gave me was partnership. Someone who saw my value when I was invisible. Someone who listened when nobody else would." "We saved each other," Marcus said. "No," Claire corrected gently. "We found each other. There's a difference. You were never too far gone to be saved. You just needed someone to show you what you were too afraid to see." They sat in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker in windows across the city, each one representing lives being lived, struggles being endured, love being shared. "I'm going to call the documentary 40 Minutes That Changed Everything," Jenny announced, appearing in the doorway with her camera. She was 15 now, already planning a film about their story for her school project. "That's how long you talked that first night, right? From when Marcus ordered his burger until you finished your shift?" "Something like that," Claire said, smiling. 40 minutes, Mission mused. "Crazy how fast a whole life can change." Marcus thought about that. 40 minutes from arrogant billionaire to humbled student. 40 minutes from wealth without meaning to the beginning of something real. 40 minutes from loneliness to the first fragile thread of connection. Not crazy, just proof that transformation doesn't require years, it just requires truth at the right moment spoken by the right person. "Pretty sure that's going to be the quote on your joint tombstone," Jenny teased. "Here lie Marcus and Claire, who proved that waitresses are smarter than billionaires." "No," Claire said firmly. "Here lie Marcus and Claire, who learned that wisdom has nothing to do with wealth, and everything to do with whether you're brave enough to listen when truth finds you." Marcus raised his glass of wine. "I'll drink to that." They toasted. Three people who'd found each other across impossible circumstances, who'd built a family from choice rather than obligation, and who'd learned that the richest life is one lived in service of something larger than yourself. And in the distance, the city continued its endless symphony of humanity, Millions of people searching for meaning, connection, a reason to matter. Some would find it, some wouldn't. But Marcus knew with absolute certainty that he'd found his. It had started with a joke, a mocking question asked by a man who'd forgotten how to be human. It had been answered with words that shattered his world and rebuilt it better. Invest in being a person someone would miss if you died tomorrow. Those words had saved him. And in saving him, they'd allowed him to help save others. That was legacy. That was wealth. That was the only investment that truly mattered. The rest was just numbers on a screen, meaningless without love to give them purpose. As Marcus took his final step into the unknown, he knew this wasn't the end, just the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. The choices he made today would echo into tomorrow, shaping the battles, alliances, and revelations still to come. His journey is only getting started, and the next chapter will push him further than ever before. If you want to follow Marcus's path, uncover the secrets ahead, and never miss what happens next, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps the story alive, and the adventure is just beginning.